Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMS Cast. I'm joined by a very special guest. He's a friend. He is co-owner of LifterLMS with his wife Kim. He's the co-founder of Paid Memberships Pro. We're going to have an awesome conversation today. I know Jason really well. I think the world of the guy, and I'm excited for you to listen in to our conversation. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you, Chris. I'm happy to be here. I don't know why it's taken so long to get on this podcast, but hopefully this breaks the seal and I can be like your most frequent guest.
That would be fun. That would be fun. Jason and I have toyed around about starting a separate podcast, by the way, and so we want to hear what you think about this episode. But getting into it, for those that don't know you, at the beginning of 2023, you and your wife Kim Coleman joined LifterLMS as owners. You've been helping in the business. If you out there listening or watching is a user of LifterLMS and you've seen a lot of the great innovation and stuff that's been happening over the past couple of years, Jason and Kim have been a huge part of that. But I know Jason from back in the day when I first started using WordPress and I needed a membership plugin and I installed Paid Memberships Pro, which they created. So give us the high level story of Paid Memberships Pro, where that started and what year it was and how that began.
Yeah, totally. So you've mentioned Kim a couple of times, and it's really Kim and I are married, but also business partners and been in business together since like 2006 or so. We started out as consultants building anything, lots of prototypes in the Web 2.0 era. And then we slowly focused on WordPress and then focused on e-commerce and then focused on membership sites. And we back in like 2010 or 11, we had 4 customers that needed membership functionality. Excuse me. And we didn't like, the plugin options that were there. We also saw how, building open source tools and making your code available and inviting other people to contribute and share and hosting your plugin on the WordPress.org repository, that was a way to kind of, get more exposure for the software and more people involved. So we built a membership plugin for our 4 customers and open sourced it around 2012. Sometime in 2016, we were able to switch from being like a consulting company with a plugin to like a plugin company that only sold support and updates and stuff around the plugin. So since 2016 till now, we've been growing kind of just slow and steady every year. And at this point, we're about 15 people on the Paid Memberships Pro side. And we all work remote, updating the plugin, maintaining it, taking care of our customers.
One of the things I love about Jason is he's a very humble dude. And so I always find out things like, oh, wow, this guy's really good at investing, which we're going to talk about later. But back in the day, you had an investing blog and you had a wine blog. Gary Vaynerchuk. Tell us about that, your blogging era there.
Yeah, that and it's turning out that that's kind of like a magic moment of the internet where like when blogging was taking off, that people were interested in things, could write about it. And that was useful. It wasn't like right nowadays, there's so much content that's automatically generated and generated for business. And now AI is generating content and social media is so fast. There's some blogs around that still work, but we really don't have the attention for the golden era of blogging. So we had an investing blog with 3 friends. I think I met Gary. We had a site, Wine Log, which was like a kind of social network for wine drinkers to keep track of their notes and things. And Gary advertised on the site. And I remember giving him a hard time. I forget what it was. He was going to pay me $600. And I forced him to pay me whatever the industry standard CPM was. And he's like, all right, man, you're driving a hard bargain. He's like, you might regret this because it's more important the biz dev than the $600. But he paid for the ad. That was funny. And so at different conferences, I used to run into him back in the day when he was, doing the Wine Library TV thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And the investing blog, what happened there?
Yeah, that was interesting. I thought we did a good job. So it was just me and 2 friends. We newly out of college, we had 401ks, but we didn't know what they were. So writing about something forces you to learn it. And I was really interested in it. And so it was kind of, as we invested and thought about investment, we just wrote about what we learned. And part of me regrets because like it got pretty popular. It was like one of the top, whatever, what was the site that used to like rank blogs? But we were always fighting for the top 5 investing blogs. And I think the 3 of us had different separate ways. I tapped my table. Sorry about that. And so we never really got to lean into it, but it's always been a hobby of mine. But that really is like the first time I used WordPress was for that investing blog. And it's still around. That one, investorgeeks.com, has like the old content, and it's fun. Like a lot of it holds up, like, as the economy goes through a cycle again, like the last time, like the yield curve inverted, I was like, hey, what does this mean? What's the yield curve? It's like, oh, this old Jason kind of is pretty smart. He did some research. So it's funny.
One of the other stories I love that I don't think gets enough attention is you created possibly the first e-commerce transaction on WordPress. What was that about?
Yeah, it's like hard to claim that. And when I was talking with you about that, it made me think, is there a way I could validate this? And I'm certain I wasn't like the very first, but definitely one of the first. So Kim actually was still in college, and she went to like a business school and had to like start a business in a quarter, and they started a laundry service. And so it was a website built on WordPress 2 something maybe, or in like 2004-ish. And we embedded PayPal into it. And then after that, we got other customers, and we embedded like OS Commerce was a open source. It's still around, I think, PHP based. We embedded OS Commerce into WordPress. And then sometime around 2006, we were like, we should build like the e-commerce directly into WordPress instead of kind of like, taking another tool and swapping it in. So we built like an early e-commerce plugin, but we only managed it for like our 4 customers that were doing e-commerce, and they integrated with PayPal at the time. Was like the only gateway really in town. And so that we saw, it was awesome. It had like integration with FedEx shipping, and I always thought the way we did options was pretty clever. But it was, so that was back in like 2006. We were building e-commerce into WordPress. And we saw how the open source version of that, WP e-commerce, was like the first big one. There was one called Shop with 2 P's. And then later Jigo Shop, where like, it's like, oh, like you could build this in an open source way and share it with everyone, and other people would use your tools. And that helps build a better tool. But also, I feel good that we can, enable people to make money on the internet without having to be like, they're a single developer on a single site.
Yeah, that's awesome piece of history there. And I've heard you interviewed before, so we don't have to park on it for long, but people always ask you, and Kim, what's it like to work so closely with your spouse, but you guys do a really good job. And I'm sure, you have family stuff and whatever, but if somebody's like thinking about working with their spouse or trying to make it better, what's sort of like the big lesson that you've learned there? 1 or 2 things that like make it work?
Man, I don't know if it's something you can learn. So it's kind of, you have to try it. Like I suspect definitely not every couple can do this, but if it does work, it's awesome because you get to spend, Kim and I get to spend tons of quality time together. And actually, now that the business has grown, we kind of have different areas that we have to manage. We don't work together as much. And it's like, man, can we just like work on a little project together? That's really fun. Versus, like just managing different teams and bringing each other like the headaches that come up in like normal course of business. But I guess like some tips, we're both the type of people that work through problems and don't take things personal. And so we're kind of able to get heated, about work things and then separate it as good as possible. It doesn't always, sometimes it bleeds over into the personal life. But we're good in general. So like outside of business, when there's conflict between Kim and I or things coming up, like we talk and communicate well and solve it. So that, you know what I mean? Like the fact, if you can manage that part of your relationship well together, that's like an indicator that you can manage those same kinds of issues in business. And then, like it's good to, set time for each other and the typical things of like, hey, we're not working now, but it's harder, especially like you work from home in the home business and you're, so when we hang out, we go out to dinner, we're talking about work. It's interesting. And we try to make time for other things, but we also don't get too hard on ourselves. I think Alex Hormozzi or Layla, they're, another like couple that work together. and they say like, we just like work. We like doing the work. Like I don't feel guilty about it. So that's good too. Like I don't feel guilty. Like we got to dinner and we talk about work. It's fun. Like we're enjoying building stuff together. So we don't feel guilty about it. But we do try to like make safe spaces where it's like, hey, we're with the family, with the kids, we're doing other stuff.
Speaking of building stuff together, we're part of the creator economy. We create software, we've done blogs, we make content. What's your view on how the creator economy is, what it used to be, and where it's going?
Yeah.
It seems like it's having a moment right now where like it's like there's a lot of desire and drive for people to build creator businesses, but it's always been around, but it's changed. Like, what's your perspective there?
Yeah, we are kind of like riding a wave of people selling themselves online in some way, creating courses, content. And so that's been interesting aspect of the business. And it feels like that kind of thing is going to continue, that we're building all these tools for people to start these online businesses. They're going to use them. One of the most important things about this is just like, I even don't really understand it, is the scale of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many people out there. And so when you sell a course or some content online or a membership site, your total addressable market is huge. Even it's just like, it's not just like the little town you're in, it's like all of America, but also all of the world. And I think so some stat is like, for every 22,000 people in the United States, there's a McDonald's. So if you like, that's like a unit of like a metric. And so if there's a McDonald's, there's probably like a law office, like a garage to fix your car, like all these services that, a dentist for every 22,000 people. So if you imagine like the 22,000 people around the McDonald's is closest to you, like, could you sell your course to one of them? Okay, cool. Now there's not 22,000 people in the world. There's like 3 billion people on the internet. I did the math earlier. It's like 150,000 times more people on the internet than like around your local McDonald's. And so it's like 150,000 is like a huge number. So like if you could sell one person at the McDonald's, like over the course of a week, there's 150,000 people like that person in the rest of the world. Like, I don't know if the math works out. And so like, that's just why, and I think that's like one of the secret sauces of why this career path is so successful, is that if you really can build something that people need and want, you can find the audience online. And that's not easy. That's work sometimes. But if you do, there's tons of money to be made. And also like you're making a bigger impact. So like if you, are in the education space and you're teaching people, like it's very admirable to be a teacher at a school and you get like a classroom every year, 30 or so kids per year. But if you're teaching online and you can hit 150,000 people every year, that's just like a bigger impact. So I think that's why people are drawn to the space.
One of the core missions of Paid Memberships Pro is helping people get paid. Yeah. Where did that mission come from? Like, I mean, I can see it in the thread of your story. Like, all right, I'm building e-commerce on WordPress and figuring that out and helping facilitate the money to go through. You built your own creator career, but what's the genesis of helping people get paid?
I remember I was on a radio show in the Philly area, and the interviewer kept pressing me like, what did your parents teach you about business? And at first I was like, nothing, man. I'm my own. I'm self-made. Like they had nothing to do with it. I did this all myself. And I was like, I don't remember that was childhood. Like this is my adult life. Why are you keep pushing me back to my childhood? He's like, there's something in your childhood that did it. And so it forced me to reflect. And I was like, they're absolutely right that when I was a child, like my family had money problems. I came from like a middle class, maybe like lower middle class. And when my parents got slightly better jobs, like moved up a little bit, family and like money was tight. I saw money problems, and my dad would talk to me very openly about it. And he was optimistic about he's like, you don't want to work in a factory like I do. You should, be a doctor or a lawyer, or you could do more. Like he opened my mind to like entrepreneurship, even though he didn't do it himself. He knew it was an opportunity. And so like, as a child, he'd have these, conversations with me, and he always encouraged it when we did it as kids. Like we were selling newspapers on the side at school. We got in trouble because it was like an underground newspaper versus like the official school newspaper. And, like selling candy to your friends and stuff. Like I was always doing these entrepreneurial things. And my dad he saw that like that was a path. And so it instilled in me that like, if you have money problems, you actually can address them. You can take control of them. And I kind of took that in my childhood. And whenever, it's like, you got to get to college and how do you get scholarships for this? It's like, figure it out. You want to get a car. And so I saw the flip side of that, both like the people who don't have money, and then people also who feel like they don't have the power to do anything about it. Like they feel victimized by it. So I was like, oh, like it feels good to build these tools to help people get paid. And then also like teach them how to use them so that they can, take care of themselves. And also like associations and charities that use our tools, collectively use the money to do good in the world that, that they want to do.
Speaking of building tools, why open source? Like, why is that important to you as a engineer and entrepreneur?
Yeah. So part of that was that story of when we had basically a closed source solution for our 4 customers. They were the only ones who could use it. So I see it as a way of making it public and available for others to use. And then I also feel like it makes the best software. The more people who use it, the more people who get involved, the more kind of incentive and motivation it is for a random consultant implementing it for one customer, like finds a bug and helps you patch it. And so it seems like the way to make the best software. And then I think there's also like this kind of like business model or like the business model aspect of it, of giving it away for free and just charging for the services. For some reason, it bothers me like when a business model feels like a toll. And I think I developed this like watching like the MP3s, Napster music industry phenomenon. There's a version of that going on with like AI content too, where like the technology is moving in a direction and it's kind of like get on board, or like, there's like a physics of it, of like, information is free. And like the cost to, clone an MP3 and give it away is free. So it kind of like has to happen. Like people want it for free and they don't want to pay for it. And you set up a toll. It doesn't feel right. So I kind of, business models like that, where like software is, you kind of like charge for it and you only give it to people if they charge. Like it just feels like I'm fighting against the physics of like the information of the internet. And so I'm more inclined to like, hey, give it away for free and then find ways to build businesses on top of that, get people using it. And then if I'm helping people make money and saving time and stuff, like I'll find ways to make money, business on top of that.
You're probably one of the biggest champions of open source I know. And in some ways you take the challenge to be even more open source than WordPress itself. What does that look like to you? How do you think about that? Like, how can we be even more open source?
Yeah, I mean, like one kind of specific way is that the code that we write, we make all of it publicly available on GitHub. There's some internal tools that aren't, and sometimes when we're starting a new project, we keep it private for a little bit until it's ready to go. But otherwise, like there's 198 repositories or so, Stranger Studios. Every line of code is on GitHub, so people can interact with it, but also use it. Like it's easy to like, you download the zip file, you install it and run it. Like there's no kind of complication. There's no service required to get it running. The same exact plugin that you would get off WordPress.org, or if you come to our site and give us money or go to GitHub, it's like the same exact plugin. And so, I mean, as a developer myself, that just enables so many things. Like weekly, I'm working on something. I mean, just today it was kind of, or I was building something and I know that this other company has a similar thing. And I'm like, I wish I could just look at that code and see how they do it. And I know I can get it. I can go to like, find someone who has it or buy it from them, or GPL Vault. It's like weird that I have to go through these hoops to gain access to the code. Because what we're going to end up doing is building a better thing. So I don't want that friction on our software either. So like putting the code away for free. And I feel like when Automatic bought WooCommerce a few years ago, I know WooCommerce had closed repositories for their plugins. And at that time, most of the WordPress plugin type stuff Automatic did was on .org and open. And so I was like, what's going to happen here? Will will like the automatic influence over WooCommerce and their plugins will get open, or will, the WooCommerce kind of business aspect charging for software influence automatic? And I think the latter happened. Like the extensions, and as I'm talking about this, I'm not judging. I'm just kind of like saying what I see out there, because there's very valid reasons for doing things the way that they do. They have business relationships with like all the developers who made those extensions, and they feel that keeping the code hidden will drive more revenue. What I'd like to do, and actually Lifter could be an example of this, like also has kind of extensions that aren't fully open on GitHub, is like we can test that, because I saw it with our own plugins that it doesn't seem to have an impact on revenue. With some of the Sandhill stuff that they did before the Automotive acquisition, I think they've had repositories that went from private to public, I believe, or either the other direction, and like they didn't see any change in sales. And so I think we can kind of make money off, other things than, just keeping people from using the tool. And I also, it's like we're motivated to get people to use the tool. Like if someone uses our plugin and makes money off it and I'm not involved, like I'm like, that's great. Like that's actually the goal, is like I'm doing well, we'll do well enough, we'll make enough money to maintain the plugin. Like my real goal is to get as many people using the software as possible. And that's not the goal of every business out there. Like there is like a weight of a user who's not paying you, and you have to kind of support them and stuff like that. And it's fair that businesses make business decisions to not support people that aren't giving them money. But it's weird. I was watching a Sam Altman interview. It's like weird to compare myself to him. He's like the most popular person on the planet right now. But but something that rung true with me, that he was talking about how when they did some kind of reformation of OpenAI, he didn't take any equity in the business, and people were like, "Why not?" He's like, "I'm already a billionaire. I don't need any more money." And they're like, "But so why are you doing this?" He's like, "I want to build AGI and give it to humanity." And everyone's like, "Yeah, but what do you really want to do? Like, what's your real goal?" Like, people don't trust that that's his incentive. And he said on an interview something like, if I just took a bunch of money and said, I'm trying to make as much money as possible, they'd be like, "Oh, okay." And then he could make the money and give it away or something. Like society and the business partners and everyone would accept it more readily than him saying like, I'm just trying to make cool software. So I feel like I'm in the same boat. Like it's a different kind of thing. Like we're making a membership plugin and he's making, like AGI, but I'm really just trying to like that is the goal. And I struggle with it because it feels like you're like going uphill. It's like, it's similar to that, like the physics of the information. I'm trying to like go with that wave, but there's this like capitalism saying like, nah, man, like people understand when you're asking for money. People understand when business relationships are incentivized by the money involved. It is like the common currency of like how deals get done. And I don't know, it's a strain like that I got to work out in the business.
And it's not a magic trick. Like there is value for paying for the software and accessing the support team and having automatic updates. Like it's not like a win-lose scenario. Yeah. My big takeaway from listening to you is like there's the physics of innovation. And if you really care about that and care about an open source and decentralization and empowering people, like that can work with greater velocity if you are truly open source, and you can still build a business around at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. It's like you don't want to fight those factors. I think maybe like a tip that helps like the course creators and content creators out there too, or if you believe in this thing I'm talking about, it's similar to that MP3 analogy where Spotify is kind of the way people get their music now, or similar tools. And it's all about the easing the delivery. Like they I'm grasping at the words here, but it's not the actual music that they deliver. It's the ease of use. They make it easier. They package it better. They bring it to all the devices where you want it. They make it as fast as possible, all that stuff. And I think there's a similar thing in the content space where I've often told people, and I'd like to like hands-on, like feel this experiment because to know that it really works. But a lot of people are kind of scared to put their content out there, or they have free content and they want to make paid content. And now they feel like their paid content has to be better. And it's like, no, like you already have like the awesome video that teaches someone how to, quit drinking, or how to build something, or how to connect this tool. Like you don't have to make a better version of that. You just have to like ease the delivery, package it up in the right way that the people want, find the customers where they are and put it in the format and everywhere they want it. Like there's value in that. So that's very similar in terms of like music. It's all about like delivering it to them in the way that they want. Our plugins, delivering it to them in the way that they want. We make it easier for them. They're happy to give us some money to do it, so they don't have to download it off GitHub and figure it out on their own. And the course content that we give them, they can find the same stuff in YouTube or Ask ChatGPT, but if we deliver it exactly where they want it in the format that best works for them, and also like maybe like we segue to the AI conversation, like with the human touch. People, you can ask ChatGPT about things and it's getting more and more knowledgeable and smarter and able to browse the web and figure things out and reason, but people still like learning certain things in particular from other humans, and they like chatting. I think like communities becoming more popular. That's a thing that you putting these people with like interests in the same chat room to talk with each other, and facilitating that is like, that's something that that's valuable, that people are willing to pay for it, and it can't kind of be automated yet, but maybe that's an opportunity to automate it. But yeah,
you have a lot of experimentation with AI and have studied it and language models and all this, and you're definitely on the front end of all that stuff. How can course creators, people building coaching programs, membership sites, just building websites in general, what are some of your principles around AI and where it's going for the creator?
Yeah, for myself, I'm trying to like have an AI first mentality when I'm solving problems or doing work, where I might like struggle through a first draft on my own. And I'm like, man, the AI is really good at taking my notes and turn it into a first draft. Like take my notes, turn it into a first draft. And so that's one too, is like, if you really embrace the tools and use them, it can speed up a lot of things, and it can get you over these like creative humps that you have. And it's very similar. It's kind of like writing in particular, but there's analogies to video production and other things. It's easier to like make a bad first draft and then go into edit mode and edit it. And so like using the AI it's like good at both those things in different ways. It's kind of like it can help you get that bad first draft more quickly, and it can also help you with the editing. So like embracing the tools is good. I do think like in terms of the type of content the creators are making, AI is going to have an influence. So in the short term, there's going to be this phase where like humans plus AI will make better content than AI alone, or humans alone even. And that's similar to what happens in like chess and poker and other places where like computers got really good at playing those games. Like if you think of course creation as a game, like the computer's getting good at it. I don't know how long that phase is going to be, but say it's like 5 years, you got to like, so embrace the tools and try to use them. You'll be able to make better stuff than without it. But again, like back on the type of content, I think there was a kind of content that was mostly informational. It was kind of like how to pass a test, and the language models kind of have a lot of this even built in, or they can figure it out. They find it, and I think they're only going to get better. Like it's just like the MP3 world. Like the data's out there. Even if the LLM in some ways is going to like consume someone else's old course, regurgitate it, like you kind of can't stop that from happening. Like the information. So courses that were informational, I would fade those. They seem less useful because people are going to have these answers, like really good versions of the answers at their fingertips. But there's other kinds of courses, like I said, like community type stuff, bringing humans together, stuff that's like IRL in the real world. Almost like, what are the best places to eat in Paris is like a better course maybe in the future than like, how to pass XYZ test. Because people want a human to answer. I mean, obviously the LLMs can't eat yet, but like people, they can aggregate reviews, I guess. But like people, even if you could get like the aggregated reviews and you get like the human aspect, like people want that content from a human. So I think like ask that question: what kinds of content, what kinds of interactions do people want to do with a human? I think like art is big. So like, even though the generative models are good at writing, they're good at painting and making images and stuff, there's something like human about art that like it like it devalues the art when you can just ask the computer to generate a painting and you're like, I've seen this and I felt it. Other people probably interact with these tools. They're like, yeah, so what, big deal. And you're like, so you're not amazed by like the awesome, painting of a dragon in space and like neon colors, but like art, like the story of the art, the connection to humanity, the connection to your own story, like all that stuff is real and you can't, you can't make, it's not artificial. You can't make it. So that kind of stuff will have value. So I think like communities, stuff that's in real life, stuff related to art, people are going to value like learning about that stuff from humans.
What's your take as an engineer and a developer with AI? Like, if you're, let's say, customizing, you want to write a custom plugin for Paid Memberships Pro or LifterLMS, and you're not a developer, can AI do that? Maybe not now, maybe in the future. Like, how do you use AI as a developer, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, it feels like the tools now are really good for experts and also good for training, but like a little dangerous in the tools in the hands of a beginner. Um, and in certain contexts, that's okay. But if you've kind of never programmed before, you like 90% of the time, it'll be like 95% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, you get code that works and it's exactly what you want. But that 1% of the time, like if you don't understand, and it's more than 1% now, but this stuff will get better. But it's often making like little mistakes, adding S's to the end of something that totally breaks. And so people using the tools, it's good. I tell my teams, it's like you have to check every single line of code that the AI writes, and you have to understand every line of code. So it speeds up the process, especially for like some like tedious things. When you're programming, there's kind of like tedious things that you do, and the AI is just like, here's a pattern, and then you similar to like writing content, it helps you get over that hump. It gives you bad code and then you fix it up. It's really good at like if you know how to, so if you know how to program one language, it's really good to help you learn another language. And so that's good. Like when the world is changing and it's like, hey, old timer, now learn React, it's like, shoot. And it doesn't feel like starting at square one. It feels like you get a couple steps ahead because the co-pilots and things like that help you pull it up. But if you have enough programming knowledge to know like that when something is wrong, it helps a lot. It saves time. It's almost it's kind of like calculators in school. Like there's a reason to learn. It's hard. Education is tough with LMs. Like you kind of have to like not have that tool, so you learn how to do it with your human brain and appreciate it. And then like, okay, here's a tool, and you're like, oh my god, now I can do so much more. But these language models and AI now, they're also good tutors. Like they can watch you, what you're doing, and help you learn. So there's such a temptation, like it can just do it for you, but there's still value in learning how to program, I think. And so, you want to try to use the tool to help you learn rather than just like leaning on it to just give you the answer. It's tough. I don't know. Is it?
Well, crossing back over to the human side, or one of the things I love about working with you and Kim is you're positive people, right? And you treat people well, but you navigate complex and situations, sometimes conflict. And what I've learned is, I know you have as well, when you're reaching, those so many people, the 1 out of 22 at every McDonald's around the world, and you're like interacting with humanity at scale through the internet, sometimes you get treated a little nasty, let's say like in a support ticket or just some kind of communication or a review of your software. And even just more broadly, like working remotely when you're not like in an office together or whatever, like sometimes people behave differently than when they're in person pressing the flesh. How, and it can hurt people, like, especially if you're sensitive and empathetic, and, somebody treats you nasty when you're trying to like provide this tool and you genuinely care about helping them. And how do you, how have you, it's not just like building thick skin or whatever, like how do you
Right.
navigate negativity when you're operating at scale on the internet?
Yeah. This is important to me because I like like two reasons. One is, like you said, it's not just developing a thick skin and getting over it. Like I don't know, you can't get your skin thick enough for like those negative interactions to not ruin your day. Like the first time I yelled at my kid because I was like in a mood because I was talking with a bad customer in the morning. It was like, wow, this is wrong. Like I have to get a handle on this so that the negative stress of work doesn't bleed into like the rest of my life. And then I talk to other creators, people building products who want to sell things, and they're like, oh, I'd rather sell to a small number of people because I don't want to deal with the backlash, or like I don't want to go on Instagram, like people are gonna make fun of me or talk this, or I don't want to do this because these people will get upset. Like, so people are making business decisions based on like their perceived inability to handle negative feedback in certain cases. So I'll talk about this. I have a blog post called Dealing with Haters on the Paid Memberships Pro blog. So if you search for that, you might find it. And it kind of lays out a lot of this stuff. But there's some things like you can do some things to prevent it. So, if you have a all money guarantee, like give them their money back and get them away from you as soon as possible, like that can like diffuse it so you don't even have to deal with it. You can, process your refunds quickly. Every time someone gets upset about something, like we often like end up adding a line to our terms of service or tweaking on this line here. Like famously, someone said like, you said this would be easy. And I was like, who said business would be easy? I was like, told the team, scrub the word easy from our website, which is like, it's kind of like inverse marketing. Like everyone's like the easiest plugin. And I was like, this stuff ain't easy. And I was like, we got to find like other messaging that's not easy. Cause like, of course we're trying to make the software as easy to use as possible, but like, dude, you're building a business. Like it's not going to be easy. So yeah, like managing expectations helps, but you can't avoid it because like if you go from 30, we went from consulting the products. And so we had like 30 customers a year, maybe. And you could deal with it. And then actually like the way to deal with it's different. Like when you're in consulting, you go above and beyond and someone's kind of getting out of line. You would just like find the time, pour it on them, over deliver, clear your conscience, and then kind of like, stop working with them. But you really could like pour on the love and give them some good stuff, to smooth it over. But you have like 30,000 users, like you just can't do that. And there's so many more people who are just having a bad day. They're irate. They're falling through the cracks. They're upset and like they lash out at you. So it's like finding, so some tips too is like, look for that criticism. So like I said, like update the terms of service and your expectations in your copy. Like, is there positive feedback in there? Can you like, pull your emotion, not get defensive and be like, well, they kind of have a point. We messed up here, so you got to look for those. You can like, a trick I do is like you write a draft. So to get the energy out, someone calls you an asshole, try like delete the email address or whatever it is so you don't accidentally send, or maybe copy it into a notepad and then type up like what you really want to say to this guy. A couple of those leaked out and got out when I've done that in the past, but usually I get it out of my system and then you kind of like, okay, I got it off my chest. And I can kind of like try to respond to them in like a what's best for the business and them and everyone else kind of spectating sometimes in public forums on this stuff. I also like, just always reply professionally. Like you don't want to get involved. You don't want to like lead them on. There's a way like to isolate, like isolation, like that's like important in a number of ways. Like one is, like I said, to make sure that you're not like answering customer support, like from your phone at the dinner table while your kids are around. Like, do it at a time when you have time before and after to transition, so try to like, if you're doing that activity, don't just do it whenever it comes up, like schedule it so that you're doing it at a certain time. Also, like we get to hire folks to handle the support. And I always try to monitor this. I feel like I'm like putting them on the front lines of a war to like deal with this negative energy. Some people are just better at doing it, so they're okay. They're also like, they don't take it as personal. I assume they don't take it as personal because they're not invested in it like we are. Or sometimes they're literally saying like, Jason, I want to punch Jason in the face. So if you're not Jason, like, and you read that, it hits different. So we got to take care of those people because they, but you can kind of like hire people to insulate you from it. And then like, so you'll get the stress from these things. I think also I think I didn't say is you kind of, what I said, you can't avoid it. It's going to happen. And there's different people who have said versions of this, but anything that's useful and beneficial to the world is going to have people who hate it and fight it. And you don't want to you want to listen to it as much as possible, but you know what I mean? You can't avoid it. So you have to deal with that stress. And I started meditating, as a practice, really helped a lot to kind of separate and slow things down. So I'm not as responsive. Another tip then in isolation buddy system, having people help you. Another one is engaging with happy customers. So we've done this almost as a cleansing. You get a bunch of 1-star reviews, and you kind of can, if you have access to your community through a newsletter or a Slack space, you can just be hey, do you all mind writing a positive review over at this place? And just send them the link, and you'll get a few. Or ask for feedback from your happy customers that like you. And you'll get some of that. So that'll help, warm your heart and counterbalance the negativity bias that we have, in dealing with these things.
So many good tips. If we shift back to helping people get paid or just thinking about money in general, one of the things, just watching you operate over almost 2 decades, I guess, is that's 2 decades. You're in the long game. There's this thing with creator economy, get rich quick, or if you're building software, build it up and, scale it and sell it as fast as possible. But you tend to, you've shown long game chops, playing the long game. What are your thoughts around, and I'm not saying that get rich quick is even a bad thing, or scaling and starting software, scaling it fast and selling it is a bad thing, but what's your take on the long game versus the short game when it comes to making money on the internet?
Yeah. I think there's many paths. And so there are those other paths, but they're very shiny. So people are aware of them. And maybe it's not as shiny to just have a business that grows 20-25% per year for 20 years. But compounding interest, you're oh, that goes from making 150,000 a year to making $2 million a year over a few years. And so, part of just my personality is conservative with money in a sense. I didn't taking loans or pushing, for huge wins in a sense. We really just always, we have an old spreadsheet when we did consulting that was, how many customers, what's the average price, how much money can we expect to make? And then the fun thing is we'll try to grow 25% per year, and you drag the Excel sheet down, and then you're look at all the money we make. But the hard part of that, so that's easier, cool, the number moves and I like that target. The hard part then is it forces you to figure out, well, okay, how do we actually do that? How can we actually make 25% more money? We're either raising our prices, getting more customers, or selling more stuff to the same people. And that's kind of how we operated. And I guess we started there as a business. We were just kind of let's try to grow. How are we going to do it? And at some point it made sense to swap from consulting the products. And maybe at this point in our life, we're kind of, we still set those growth targets, but we struggle with do we really need to grow? Because we're, doing well. But yeah, so maybe it's kind of just my personality. I think, it's good to know it's an option. And there are returns in this. I think I'm benefiting in ways, and I'll continue to benefit that, becoming an expert in the same thing and kind of driving home the point and working on the same thing over so long, you become an asset to the world as long as that thing is useful still. And all the people who are kind of in it for the get quick rich kind of bounce in and out. And I think probably our plugins are in a phase where there's a lot of consolidation in the WordPress space. And this happens in other spaces too, but if we're well-run, profitable businesses that don't have these issues because we didn't swing for the fences and waste a bunch of money. And so we can just sit around, and as the competitors fall, we can hopefully we can pick them up, but we compete with these giant public companies that it's easier for them to pick up the pieces. So that's something I have to figure out. But yeah. So it's sticking with it. Compounding, it makes sense in investing. The compounding interest is hard. I used to, but it also happens in terms of your skill set and your ability to kind of influence the world. That compounds too if you stick with it. when around investing, one of the things I did on the Investor Geek site was like a spreadsheet where it was like, if you you could buy a brand new car now or buy like a used car. And I forget what it was at the time. If you save like $10,000, all right, now invest that $10,000 in the average stock market returns. And then in 25 years, you'll have like 100 grand, or I forget what it was, something like that. But I remember like enough money to buy a sports car when you're going through your midlife crisis. So it's kind of like you're fresh out of school, buy the used car now, put some money away in an account, let it grow. And when you have your midlife crisis, you can buy a Porsche. And so like that, like spreadsheets can show that compound growth when like we don't really feel it. It's hard to delay gratification that way. And for some reason, it's easy for me with money and things like that. It's harder with like, eating the best food in the restaurant. It's hard for me to like eat a little less to delay gratification into my old age. But yeah.
Speaking of compounding, I think it was Warren Buffett who said the eighth wonder of the world is compounding. It's kind of one of those things like the scale of the internet is really hard to comprehend. The power of compounding is really hard to comprehend. One of the things I look up to you with is your experience and skills and advice in investing. And we could do a whole episode about investing. So just to frame it in for the creators out there, or if you build websites for clients, or you're getting you're getting paid and you're able to like, you've got your cost of living down and you're thinking about what should I do with this money. How do you think people that are kind of new to investing should think about getting in the game? And you can invest in your business, you can invest in yourself and your own education. There's stocks, real estate, crypto, collectibles. There's like all this stuff. And like, how would you advise like a newer person to investing to start making some smart moves?
Man, yeah. Maybe like, so a fun humble brag story to set the tone. Like, I guess people understand investing is important. But we've kind of worked, Kim and I have kept our expenses lean and always have been like set targets to invest. So it was kind of, there was a time when it was like all the money went away. We went through that. And then we were lucky enough to have this skill set that we could sell. And we became, hey, we can like live and eat and do things. But then we operated lean so we could always save money. And so we've always been saving like 10 or 20% of our income over time, which is a lot. Not everyone can get there, but we kept that as a goal. And I made some good moves in Bitcoin and Netflix and Tesla and whatever. But the power of that is that like a few years ago, there's just consolidation in WordPress space and people are trying to buy the plugin. And I was like, we should talk to them like this March. Let's talk to everyone and hear their best offer. And they're making offers and they're like, dude, this could be life-changing money for you. This could be life-changing money for you. And I remember talking to Kim, I was like, what's your number that like you would need to like sell the business and get out? And she gave me a number and I was like, we already have that much money. Like we've invested well. Like, and so, but sure, it feels good to have a lot of money, but it was like, I have the freedom. I didn't have to sell my business to someone to make that money because I want to like send my kids through college or because I don't want to work. I have Kim and I have the freedom to choose to show up and do this instead of like being forced to. And that's partially due to like, saving, being disciplined about money, saving money and letting it compound over 15 years, but so that's it. It's kind of, you want to save, you want to get to that spot. Like if you have to spend all your money, like, cause you're only making enough to really like sustain yourself where you're living. You have to get there first. And then it's kind of like, you want a skill that the world values. You can parlay that into making money. So like, you want to set aside a big chunk. It helps to like do it first, like have a separate savings account. Like when the money comes to your check-ins account, always put some into the savings account. That's the money to save. And there's a number of ways to do it. Like you should invest in your 401k or IRA. Most people should just invest in like total market funds, like the VTI, the NASDAQ funds, like technology. That's like maybe one tip if you want to be like a little risky is like put half your money in the QQQ. The NASDAQ has most of the tech companies. And if you're optimistic about technology like I am, like they should outperform, like they continue to outperform like they have in the past. But if you start picking stocks and things, I do that because it's fun. Like, and I realize it's in my wheelhouse. Like, and especially the technology stuff that like I have an understanding of how it all interplays and the players and the companies and what they're doing. And so when I hear, Microsoft say we're going to make AI that will change the world, and Facebook says we're going to make AI that will change the world, I can kind of judge like who's really going to benefit from that. In other areas where I don't have domain expertise, like like the energy sector or in pharmaceuticals, they all say the same thing, and I was like, I can't pick which pharmaceutical company is going to outperform. So, like you want to keep it simple, and there's different ways. Like what's that little book of Invest in John Bogle, his like invest 60/40 portfolio, something simple. There's like time frame ETFs, so you can like you could buy like I'm going to retire in 30 years, and they just kind of generally invest in the stock market. Like, so specifically what to do, like you should do that. So kind of like, hey, make enough money to get by. As soon as you do, set up an account that's separate from your main checking account, so you can kind of hide the money away and you don't feel it. And whenever you get a raise or you make more money, kind of set aside a certain percentage of that goes into the investment account, and then regularly move that money into a very generalized, kind of investing scheme. And that's probably like the number one thing you can do is like, then as your income grows, as you're going, like you're continually setting aside a certain amount into investing.
How do you think about time horizon for a beginner?
Yeah. For investing time horizons?
Like, I heard this advice once, like think of it as being a collector, not an investor, like long time horizon.
Yeah.
Like you can day trade and have short-term stuff that you do, but like if you're investing for your future, just start as young as possible and kind of forget about it. Like put it.
Yeah.
But what would you say?
There was like Robert Kawasaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That book is decent, especially if you come from a poor dad. That character Kawasaki is problematic these days, but but like I remember he had a game that like you would play. It was kind of like Monopoly, but it was a little more real world, and it was all about like building assets versus like expenses. So it's kind of like you go on vacation, all that money leaves. If you buy a stock, you get a return every year on that. If you buy a treasury bond, you get a return, or if you buy a business, it probably has a return. Or so that's like a way to it's like, and that book talks about that, like building assets. There's also a good one called like Phil Town has one called Rule Number One, and then one called Payback Time. And that's interesting because rule number one is like he's introduced to day trading and swing trading. I think actually he's a swing trader. So swing trading is like you hold a investment over a course of like a week or a month instead of like a day. So he's all in, and he has really good advice on like picking stocks and then like learning technical analysis. And his second book, he's like, I was all wrong. Like I was investing way too active. The people who are really, really rich, they just own the stock and hold it forever. And so that's like that idea of like collecting these assets over time. And I definitely have that. Like, I think like I said, most people should just buy the ETF, and maybe you can like try to get as many shares of the VTI. It's hard to like personify like an ETF the same way you can like like if you're investing like companies, you're like, I'm on team Facebook, I'm on team Apple. And you can make room for making individual investments like that. And I do, when you do that, I do recommend like, you want to think of it as like you're owning a business. You can even just take Apple and like chop off for whatever it is, like 6 zeros. And it's like, oh, it's a company that has about $300,000 and makes about $500,000 a year and has about, and like, if you are trained to, it's like, if you're buying a laundromat, first buying Apple, you can make like an investment in the stock with that same mindset. And if you're not thinking about price going up and down, you're just kind of like, it is a superpower if you're investing in individual stocks to have like a 5-year time frame, because no one does really. Like managers have a yearly time frame they have to deliver. The fund managers who buy most of the stocks, they have to deliver every year, and so they're making moves in a year. Like only Warren Buffett is the guy who's like buying and holding stocks forever. And so you kind of have an advantage if you can sit out the swings, but it's hard. You have to be able to like when a stock you buy goes down, see it as a positive. Like if you really feel invested in the company, like I know it's, temporary, it's easier to hold that stock, and you want to buy, you're like, it's on sale, buy more. And if you're thinking 5 years out and you have some kind of model saying it's going to be worth 2 times 5 years out, you don't mind that it dips 10, 20, even 50% now. I don't know. So yeah, just rambling about the way that, having that 5-year time frame on those kinds of investments, because no one else is thinking on that time frame, it's kind of a superpower. Like there's it gets a little technical, but there's things like I always lose like options trading. Like when options expire, that's like a gamble. You can say like, I think they're going to win, they're going to lose. There's like literally supercomputers that are analyzing all the trades, and then they just figure out how to like suck up all the money, right? Like like they're just kind of like, oh, like, and they have enough money that they can like manipulate the market. This is like tinfoil hat stuff, but it's effectively happening. Like they can like manipulate the market to have a stock go down. Everyone, like the most amount of people lose money on their options, then the stock goes back up, and they get in. And so it's like it's like playing online poker, and you're playing with bots that are superhuman. Like if you're investing on a short time frame, you're literally investing against computers that are superhuman on it. But the computers aren't investing on a 5-year time frame. So it's like a different game. You're like, you get to go hang out with the old guys at the poker lodge, and they're playing Omaha, and they never even read a book. Like, so it's like, I'd rather be in that poker game than a poker game with a bunch of computers that are better than I am.
And I'm sure you'd agree with me that if you must be a gambler or a degen, do it with like 5% or some smaller percent, or after a certain threshold. Like you don't, it's not like you have to choose to, you can split that focus and like still feed that need to like pick stocks because they're fun, or try something risky. But just don't bet the farm, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's like common advice. Like, I don't know where it's 10% or 5%. It's good. I always treat it like it's educational. And even like I said, I always lose at that options trading thing. I still do it from time to time because it forces me to like interact in the market in a way I don't usually, and I learn a lot. And I lose money, but it's a relatively small amount. It's less than 10, it's like less than 1% of what I have invested. I'm making bets on stuff like that. So I think, if you have that mindset of like, it's a small amount of money, I can lose it. I'm going to do this investment. I'm going to learn in the process. Like you kind of can't lose. Even if you lose the money, you're like, okay, well, I learned a new way to lose money, and I'm glad it was only X% and not everything. And I think that's good, because sometimes I think there are opportunities. Like if you really understand the business well, and the stock is on sale, like if you have bought individual stocks before, you'll feel more confident to be able to do it now. Like, so you won't miss those opportunities if you kind of educate yourself on that. But I struggle with that because I'm like a nerd about this, and I spend like hours every day, like, interacting with it. And I'm like, if I didn't do that, I don't know like how it, but I mean, if you are going to do it, it's good to do it like with that mindset of, I'm going to learn, and it's a small amount of money. Yeah.
Well, that's Jason Coleman from Paid Memberships Pro and partner at LifterLMS with his wife, Kim Coleman. Thanks for coming on the show, Jason. I really appreciate it. I'd encourage you to go check out Paid Memberships Pro. That's at paidmembershipspro.com. They also have a feature for using Paid Memberships Pro and LifterLMS together called Streamline. So you can actually use both tools side by side if you want. And it's great to be on the journey with you, Jason. Any final words for the people as we say goodbye, or other ways that people can track you or connect with you on the internet?
That's good. I am on X, Twitter, Jason_Coleman. So that's a decent way to follow my occasional posting and get in touch with me by DM or something there.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, and I look forward to doing it again with you sometime.
All right. Thanks, Chris.